Now, and local trade remains under pressure this morning as negative sentiment from yesterday continues. The JSE falling most of the week, and in particular yesterday, the rand fell to a record low after the United States accusation that South Africa was involved in aiding Russia's war effort, adding that this is a risk, a massive risk at that. Let's talk now to Matete Thulare. He's head of foreign exchange execution at Rand Merchant Bank, joining us now to give us a quick sense of how the JSE is performing in early trade. Mr. Thulare, we'll start with the plummeting rand. It has now breached that 19 rand to the dollar mark and bringing the currency to its lowest since the COVID pandemic.
Good morning, Cody. I suppose not a happy Friday. I mean, obviously the rand has tumbled and touching record lows this morning against the dollar. Just a few minutes ago, we touched 19.45 against the dollar. Obviously, as the geopolitical risks have added to the investor concerns over concerns already overlaid by the domestic energy crisis, the global interest rates that have been hiking. Now, already yesterday you saw this report that is citing a U.S. ambassador to South Africa saying that South Africa obviously supplied weapons to Russia. Now, with yesterday's move, this has extended the losses on a year-to-date basis for the rand against the dollar to about 12%. Now, we are one of the worst performing emerging market currencies. We have been underperforming our peers even before the report got released yesterday. I mean, already just from a geopolitical perspective, the mere fact that there's been foreign bond outflows, there's been talks about a potential U.S. recession, the bank crisis stresses, there's been geopolitical tension also out in Asia. The Chinese data hasn't been looking too great. We've also had energy shortages as well locally. So already when you combine all of these, it's the perfect cocktail to see actually the rand weaken. I mean, already the concerns about South Africa's inability to curb the power supply crisis is also weighing on the rand. And already you've seen the Reserve Bank locally amongst those that have reduced the growth projections for this year to near zero. Now, I suppose at this point in time, it's about we wait to see whether we actually breach 1950 and do we edge ourselves closer to the new mark, which could potentially be 20 against the dollar.
Let's talk commodities. Gold prices also ticking down this morning as the dollar continues to hold firm. A spot of gold falling by 0.3%. What's driving market moves there?
So look, I mean, gold obviously has edged higher this year. I mean, obviously the U.S. inflation data has come in cooler than expected. Now, this is reinforcing expectations that the Federal Reserve will pause their interest rate hike cycle at their meeting next month. I mean, the prices for gold have traded higher in early this week. At least that is supported by the concern about the debt ceiling. Already we know that President Biden and his counterparts will be talking about that later this afternoon. But we've also seen gold benefiting from just, the expectations that the Fed has finished their hiking cycle. Now, already we've seen gold trading above $2,000 an ounce, which is the most. And I suppose at this point in time, the next key figure for gold is 2,100. Now, despite the easing PPI inflation, the solid jobs data that we saw last week, and the high, inflation, that could give the Fed the green light to actually just pause next month. But also, it is going to be interesting to see what happens with the U.S. debt ceiling, especially with talks continuing later this afternoon out in the U.S. That could also see the gold price strengthen further if there's more anxiety and uncertainty from a U.S. debt ceiling perspective.
Let's talk factory activity. It continues to take a knock. In March, output slipped by 1.1%. That's year on year. Talk us through some of the hardest hit sectors and what this data, together with the mining data that was released just recently, tells us about the state of health of South Africa's economy.
Sure. I mean, the March outcome from the manufacturing side, I mean, that beats the Bloomberg estimate where we expected a dip of around 5.8%. It came out at 5.6%, but there was a noticeable improvement when we saw the month-on-month figures. Obviously, output there increasing by 4% compared to the prior reading where we had a negative 1.3%. Now, the largest positive contributions came from food and beverages, which was about close to 6%, the motor vehicle and parts, which was also close to 6%. Nevertheless, despite some improvements in March, the broader picture remains challenging. I mean, with actual output production volumes still close to 10% below pre-COVID levels. Now, the ongoing power cuts that we are seeing, that intensify and abate unpredictably, that has introduced a high degree of volatility in the high-frequency data such as mining and manufacturing, which is making it difficult to forecast these numbers, especially given the fact that already this year we've seen almost every day we've had power cuts, and obviously that does play into the manufacturing side, it plays into the mining sector, and that actually affects their production numbers. I mean, you've just seen also a lot of manufacturing companies, a lot of mining companies, they're all forecasting for their production numbers to actually be lower this year than anticipated for the past couple of months.
Let's then talk company news. AngloGold Ashanti giving investors a market update for the quarter which ended on the 31st of March 2023. How are their numbers looking?
Look, I mean, also quite an interesting one from the mining sector. I mean, it's their first quarter gold production. That's declined, obviously, over a year long, and it's a slight decline also in their adjusted profit numbers. Already they're maintaining that their 2023 gold production numbers guidance is in the range of around 2.4 million ounces to around 2.6 million ounces. They're also expecting about 4% growth in production in the next financial year in 2024. Now, for me, the interesting part was the announcement from Anglo Ashanti where they're marking their further disinvestment in South Africa, which was where it was founded. I mean, already now they're planning to shift their corporate domicile and their primary listing away from South Africa. They have said they have disposed their remaining operating assets in 2020 in South Africa. Now they've taken a comprehensive review of their domicile and also their listing structure, and they've concluded, the most appropriate corporate structure for them as a company, whereby they're going to have a UK corporate domicile with a US primary listing on the New York Stock Exchange. So the company has said it's got a long and standing and growing presence in the US and no longer has operating assets in South Africa. And this is why you're seeing them change and having this corporate domicile offshore relative to a local domestic presence.
Matete Thulare, let me thank you very much for that market update. He is head of foreign exchange execution at Rand Merchant Bank.